As the day comes to a close and the world around us grows quiet, it is in these moments that our hearts are most honest, most open, most raw. The night has a way of stripping away the distractions and the noise that carry us through the day. The laughter, the busyness, the tasks we checked off our list, they all fade, leaving only the stillness. And in this stillness, the truth of our hearts rises to the surface. Some of us carry joy, some carry sorrow. Some of us carry victories, others burdens too heavy to name aloud. But tonight, in this quiet hour, we are invited to come to God just as we are, not with pretense, not with polished words, not with the facade we present to the world. We are invited to bring our honest hearts. There's immense power in honesty before God. It is not weakness, it is strength. It takes courage to admit our fears, our failures, our doubts, and our disappointments. Yet God does not ask for perfection. He does not demand that we have our lives neatly arranged or our emotions fully controlled. He does not measure our worth by our accomplishments or by the way others perceive us. Instead, He longs for the real us, the heart that sometimes trembles in uncertainty, the spirit that sometimes grows weary, the soul that sometimes wonders if it is enough. When we lay our true selves before God, when we confess not only our sins, but also our struggles, our hopes, and even our unanswered questions, we allow His grace to meet us where we are. Coming to God at night with honesty also means letting go of the weight we have been carrying throughout the day. Every disappointment, every harsh word, every failure we've felt, every moment of regret, these things need not be carried alone. When we approach God honestly, we place those burdens into hands far stronger than our own. We release the tension that builds in our minds and hearts when we try to manage it ourselves. And in that act of surrender, we discover a freedom that cannot be found anywhere else. The night becomes not just a time for physical rest, but a sacred time for spiritual renewal. In the quiet of the night, honesty becomes a form of intimacy with God. We speak to Him not as an audience sees us, not as a friend expects us to, not as the world judges us, but as a child speaks to a loving parent with openness, vulnerability, and trust. Our prayers do not need to be elaborate or eloquent. Even a whisper, a sigh, a simple, "I am here, Lord, with all that I carry," is enough. What matters is the heart behind the words. The depth of our honesty unlocks a connection that can bring healing, guidance, and profound peace. As we approach God honestly, we also prepare ourselves to hear from Him. God meets honesty with clarity. He meets vulnerability with comfort. He meets sincerity with understanding. When we shed pretense, He can fill the empty spaces with His truth, His promises, and His love. And in that exchange, night after night, our hearts are slowly transformed. We learn that it is not through perfection or performance that we are made whole, but through honesty, surrender, and the simple act of coming to God with all that we are. As the night falls and darkness surrounds our homes, there is a natural vulnerability that comes with sleep. Our bodies are still, our eyes are closed, and yet our minds often remain alert, replaying worries, fears, and uncertainties. But in this sacred quiet, there is an assurance that transcends human understanding. God is awake when we sleep. He is our watchful protector, guarding our lives, our loved ones, and our homes while we rest. This truth does not come from what we see or feel. It comes from faith, from the knowledge that a loving, omnipotent God is always attentive, always vigilant, always near. The beauty of God's protection is that it is constant, unwavering, and intimate. He does not merely guard the physical spaces we inhabit. He guards the very essence of who we are. Every thought, every dream, every hope, and every fear is known to him. He watches over the restless heart, the racing mind, and the weary spirit. While we are unaware, while the world sleeps in its own uncertainty, God's presence surrounds us like an impenetrable shield. Nothing can penetrate the safety of his care, and no threat is too great for him to handle. To trust in God's protection is to acknowledge that we are not in control and to find peace in that surrender. We do not have to lie awake worrying about tomorrow, fearing the unknown, or attempting to anticipate every danger. The Lord's watchfulness frees us from the illusion that we must carry the world on our shoulders. His vigilance allows us to rest fully, knowing that every challenge, every obstacle, and every threat is already in his hands. When we sleep under his protection, we are participating in a divine partnership. We rest, and he keeps watch. This protection is also deeply personal. God does not guard humanity as a distant force. He knows our names, our circumstances, our struggles, and our hearts. He is aware of the people we love, the responsibilities we carry, and the dreams we nurture. When danger or difficulty arises, God's care is present in ways both seen and unseen. He calms the anxious heart, shields from harm, and intervenes with perfect timing. Even when life feels uncertain or the night feels long, his watchfulness never falters. Understanding God as our protector transforms the way we approach rest. Sleep is no longer merely a biological necessity. It becomes a spiritual act, an expression of trust and faith. As we close our eyes, we acknowledge that our safety does not rest solely in human effort or circumstance. We allow the creator of the universe, the one who commands the winds and the waves, to stand guard over our lives. His protection brings freedom, freedom from fear, freedom from worry, freedom from the relentless weight of uncertainty. When we internalize this truth, our nights change. We begin to sleep with confidence, not fear. We rise with renewed strength, knowing that God has been vigilant while we rested. We learn that true peace is not the absence of danger, but the presence of a God who watches over us with unwavering love and care. And as we embrace this protection night after night, our faith deepens, our trust grows, and our hearts find the security they have always longed for. Fear, anxiety, and restless thoughts are burdens that weigh heavily on the human heart, especially at night when the world is quiet and the mind begins to wander. In those still hours, our worries often grow louder, echoing in our minds, making mountains out of the smallest troubles, and convincing us that tomorrow will be just as uncertain as today. But God invites us to bring these burdens to him, to lay down the anxieties that we were never meant to carry alone. It is in his presence that fear loses its grip, anxiety is calmed, and the storm of restless thoughts gives way to peace. The act of releasing these heavy emotions begins with acknowledgement. We cannot truly give something to God if we refuse to see it clearly ourselves. We must recognize the fears that haunt our minds, the doubts that cloud our judgment, and the tension that tightens our hearts. Once we bring them into the light of God's presence, we discover that his power to hold us is far greater than any fear we face. God does not simply dismiss our concerns or tell us to ignore them. He meets them with understanding, compassion, and unwavering care. He stands beside us in our vulnerability, offering solace to the parts of us that have been restless, uneasy, and restless for far too long. When we release our anxieties to God, we are also reclaiming the night for rest, renewal, and healing. Fear has a way of stealing sleep, turning moments of quiet into hours of worry. But God's peace, unlike anything the world can offer, fills the spaces that fear once occupied. His presence brings a calmness that the mind and body recognize, allowing tension to loosen, muscles to relax, and the heart to slow its racing rhythm. As we breathe in his peace, we begin to let go of what we cannot control, trusting that the one who watches over us is more than capable of handling every challenge, every unknown, every uncertainty that tomorrow may bring. Restless thoughts often stem from the need for control, the desire to anticipate, prepare, and predict every outcome. But God reminds us that we are not in control of the universe, nor should we carry the weight of the unseen future on our shoulders. By surrendering these thoughts, we align ourselves with a higher wisdom, trusting that God's guidance is perfect and his timing flawless. Anxiety loses its power when we recognize that our lives are held in the hands of a loving God who knows what is best, even when we cannot see it. The beauty of releasing fear and anxiety to God is that it transforms not only our nights, but also our days. When we sleep with peace, we awaken with clarity, focus, and strength. The mind that rested is sharper, the heart that trusted is lighter, and the spirit that surrendered is fortified. We learn that peace is not the absence of challenges, but the presence of God's unwavering support, a steady anchor in a world that often feels chaotic. As we cultivate this practice of handing over our fears, anxiety, and restless thoughts, we experience a deep, abiding freedom. We discover that our minds can finally rest, our hearts can finally quiet, and our souls can finally breathe. The night becomes a sanctuary, a sacred space where God's love dispels fear and his protection replaces uncertainty with calm assurance. And through this release, we begin to understand the true power of trusting God fully, knowing that even in our vulnerability, we are never alone, and in surrender, we find unparalleled peace. There are nights when the weight of the day presses so heavily upon us that our bodies ache, our minds race, and our spirits feel drained. Life has a way of exhausting us through struggles, disappointments, unmet expectations, and the constant demands of the world. Yet in these very moments, God's presence offers comfort that is deeper than anything human hands can provide. He does not ask us to be strong when we are weak. He does not demand that we hold ourselves up when our shoulders are already heavy. Instead, he comes alongside us, offering rest for the weary and balm for the broken soul. Comfort from God begins with the simple recognition that we are not alone. When we feel isolated in our struggles, he whispers his presence into the quiet of the night, reminding us that he knows our pain, he sees our efforts, and he understands our exhaustion. There is a profound healing that occurs when we acknowledge that God is near, that his eyes are upon us, and that his hands are ready to lift us. In this divine comfort, we find the reassurance that the trials of the day do not define us, and that the burdens we carry are not ours to bear alone. Healing for the soul often comes in the stillness of the night. When the world is silent and the heart slows its frantic pace, God works quietly, mending the places within us that are torn, wounded, or weary. This healing is not always instantaneous, nor does it always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it is a gentle peace that eases anxiety, a subtle renewal of hope that strengthens our faith, or a soft reassurance that we are still loved, still valued, and still held. The night becomes a sanctuary where the pressures of life can fade, replaced by the quiet restoration that God alone provides. God's comfort is also an invitation to release what has hurt us. It asks us to surrender the regrets, the mistakes, the unmet desires, and the painful memories that weigh down our hearts. In letting go, we create space for his presence to fill us with peace. The more we allow God to comfort us, the more we experience healing, not just emotionally, but spiritually. We begin to understand that true rest is not merely the absence of activity, but the presence of God's nurturing care that revives our spirit and replenishes our inner strength. There's power in resting under God's care because it transforms our perspective. The burdens we carried alone in daylight seem lighter in His presence. The fears that kept us awake shrink before His promise of protection. The weariness that clung to our bodies begins to fade as we embrace the truth that God renews the weary and strengthens the soul. Every tear, every sigh, every whispered prayer is met with His compassion, and slowly the heart that was heavy begins to breathe freely again. As we allow God's comfort to reach us, we also become vessels of that same healing for others. A soul restored by His care is capable of compassion, empathy, and understanding. The night once filled with exhaustion and worry becomes a place of renewal, a reminder that God is always present to soothe, restore, and strengthen. In His embrace, the weary find rest, the broken find healing, and the soul is reminded that no matter the struggles faced, God's peace is always greater. One of the most challenging yet transformative acts a person can embrace is surrender, truly letting go of control and placing every aspect of life into God's hands. Many of us carry the illusion that we are in control, that if we plan carefully, work hard enough, and anticipate every outcome, we can manage the uncertainties of life. But the truth is, life is unpredictable, and our human efforts alone are not enough to guarantee peace, protection, or fulfillment. Surrendering to God does not mean giving up or giving in. It means acknowledging that His wisdom, timing, and power far exceed our own understanding. It is the conscious decision to trust Him fully, even when the future is unclear, even when the storms of life rage around us. Learning to surrender begins with humility, a recognition that we cannot do everything alone and that we are not meant to carry every burden on our own shoulders. We often try to control outcomes, manipulate situations, or anticipate every twist and turn in our lives, only to find that these efforts increase our stress and anxiety. But when we pause and consciously hand these struggles to God, we are taking the first step toward liberation. Trusting Him does not mean that problems disappear instantly. Rather, it means that we no longer face them alone. We walk through challenges with the assurance that God is orchestrating every detail, even the ones we cannot see or understand. Surrender is also an act of faith. It requires a deep belief in God's love, His faithfulness, and His perfect plan. When we relinquish our grip on control, we declare that we believe God's vision for our lives is greater than our own. We accept that His timing is perfect, even when it does not align with our expectations. This faith transforms the way we approach challenges, decisions, and even the small, mundane moments of life. It teaches us patience, resilience, and confidence, knowing that the one who holds the universe is also holding our lives. Trusting God fully changes how we experience fear and uncertainty. When we surrender, we release the mental and emotional burden of trying to predict, prevent, or solve everything on our own. Anxiety begins to diminish, and a profound sense of peace takes its place. Our hearts become lighter, our minds quieter, and our spirits more attuned to God's guidance. In surrender, we find freedom, the freedom to rest, the freedom to hope, and the freedom to embrace life without carrying unnecessary weight. Surrender also transforms our relationship with God. As we trust Him more deeply, our intimacy with Him grows. We begin to recognize His fingerprints in our lives, His subtle guidance in our decisions, and His unwavering presence in our struggles. The act of surrender is not a one-time event, but a daily choice, a continual acknowledgement that God is in control, that His love is unfailing, and that His plans for us are always good. Ultimately, learning to surrender and trust God fully leads to a life marked by peace, confidence, and resilience. We no longer rely solely on our understanding or strength. Instead, we anchor ourselves in the one who never fails, never sleeps, and never abandons his children. In giving our hearts, minds, and lives completely to God, we discover a freedom and a joy that the world cannot offer, a peace that surpasses understanding, a strength that endures every trial, and a hope that cannot be shaken. To rest in peace under God's protection is one of the most profound gifts we can experience. It is more than simply closing our eyes at night. It is a conscious decision to trust fully in God's faithfulness, to believe that he is watching over us, and to surrender every fear, every doubt, and every worry into his capable hands. Peace does not come from circumstances or external conditions. It comes from a heart that has chosen to rely on the one whose promises are unchanging, whose love is unwavering, and whose faithfulness endures through every season of life. Confidence in God's faithfulness begins with reflection. As we consider the ways he has guided, protected, and provided for us in the past, we build trust in his presence for the future. Every challenge we have overcome, every obstacle we have navigated, every moment when we felt alone, yet experienced a hidden provision or guidance is a reminder that God's faithfulness is constant. By remembering his goodness and acknowledging his past work in our lives, we strengthen our ability to rest without fear tonight, knowing that the same God who has never failed us before will continue to uphold us. Resting in God's peace requires letting go of the illusion that we are in control of everything. So often anxiety and sleeplessness stem from trying to predict or manage every outcome, from worrying about what might happen tomorrow or fretting over situations beyond our influence. When we surrender these thoughts to God, we free ourselves from the relentless grip of fear. Trusting his faithfulness does not mean life becomes perfect or free from challenges, but it does mean that our hearts can remain anchored even in the midst of storms. We can sleep knowing that we are not navigating life alone, that every circumstance is held in the hands of one who knows, loves, and cares for us deeply. Confidence in God's faithfulness also brings clarity and strength to the soul. A heart at peace is able to focus on what truly matters, to rest fully, and to awaken refreshed and renewed. When we trust God, we no longer allow doubts, regrets, or fears to dominate our minds. Instead, we are filled with hope, assurance, and the quiet certainty that he is faithful to his promises. Each night becomes a sanctuary where our spirit can recharge, where our minds can find calm, and where our souls can be reminded of the unwavering love of our Creator. As we rest in peace under God's protection, we also cultivate resilience for the days ahead. Confidence in his faithfulness shapes the way we face challenges, interact with others, and approach life's uncertainties. It gives us courage to step into tomorrow without hesitation, to pursue our goals with trust, and to live with the knowledge that no matter what unfolds, God remains with us. Peace becomes not just an absence of worry, but an active trust that transforms the way we live, breathe, and move through the world. Ultimately, resting in peace under God's faithfulness is an invitation to experience true freedom. It is the freedom from fear, the freedom from doubt, and the freedom from the relentless burdens that we were never meant to carry alone. When we choose to trust him fully, to surrender completely, and to rest deeply, we align ourselves with his perfect will, his enduring love, and his unshakable promises. In that alignment, we find a peace that nourishes the heart, strengthens the